1 Maccabees, chapter 10, verse 59, through chapter 11, verse 53. Now King Alexander had written unto Jonathan that he should come and meet him, who thereupon went honorably to Ptolemais, where he met the two kings, and gave them and their friends silver and gold, and many presents, and found favor in their sight. At that time certain pestilent fellows of Israel, men of a wicked life, assembled themselves against him, to accuse him, but the king would not hear them. Yea, more than that, the king commanded to take off his garments, and clothe him in purple, and they did so. Also he made him sit by himself, and said unto his princes, Go with him into the midst of the city, and make proclamation, that no man complain against him of any matter, and that no man trouble him for any manner of cause. Now when his accusers saw that he was honored according to the proclamation, and clothed in purple, they fled all away. So the king honored him, and wrote him among his chief friends, and made him a duke, and partaker of his dominion. Afterward Jonathan returned to Jerusalem with peace and gladness. Furthermore, in the 165th year came Demetrius, son of Demetrius out of Crete, into the land of his fathers. Whereof, when King Alexander heard tell, he was right sorry, and returned into Antioch. Then Demetrius made Apollonius the governor of Celesyria his general, who gathered together a great host, encamped in Jamnia, and sent it to Jonathan the high priest, saying, Thou alone liftest up thyself against us, and I am laughed to scorn for thy sake, and reproached. And why dost thou vaunt thy power against us in the mountains? Now therefore, if thou trustest in thine own strength, come down to us into the plain field, and there let us try the matter together, for with me is the power of the cities. Ask and learn who I am, and the rest that take our part, and they shall tell thee that thy foot is not able to stand before our face, for thy fathers have been twice put to flight in their own land. Wherefore now thou shalt not be able to abide the horsemen in so great a power in the plain, where is neither stone nor flint, nor place to flee unto. So when Jonathan heard these words of Apollonius, he was moved in his mind, and choosing 10,000 men, he went out of Jerusalem, where Simon his brother met him for to help him. And he pitched his tents against Joppa, that they shut him out of the city, because Apollonius had a garrison in Joppa. Then Jonathan laid siege unto it, whereupon they of the city let him in for fear, and so Jonathan won Joppa. Whereof when Apollonius heard, he took 3,000 horsemen with a great host of footmen, and went to Azotus as one that journeyed, and therewithal drew him forth into the plain, because he had a great number of horsemen, in whom he put his trust. Then Jonathan followed after him to Azotus, where the armies joined battle. Now Apollonius had left 1,000 horsemen in ambush, and Jonathan knew that there was an ambushment behind him, for they had compassed in his host, and cast darts at the people from morning till evening. But the people stood still, as Jonathan had commanded them, and so the enemies' horses were tired. Then brought Simon forth his host, and set them against the footmen, for the horsemen were spent, who were discomfited by him, and fled. The horsemen also, being scattered into the field, fled to Azotus, and went into Beth-dagon, their idol's temple, for safety. But Jonathan set fire on Azotus, and the cities round about it, and took their spoils, and the temple of Dagon with them that were fled into it, he burned with fire. Thus they were buried and slain with the sword, well nigh 8,000 men. And from thence Jonathan removed his host, and camped against Askelon, where the men of the city came forth, and met him with great pomp. After this returned Jonathan and his host unto Jerusalem, having many spoils. Now when King Alexander heard these things, he honored Jonathan yet more, and sent him a buckle of gold, as the use is to be given to such as are of the king's blood. He gave him also Acharon, with the borders thereof in possession. And the king of Egypt gathered together a great host, like the sand that lieth upon the seashore, and many ships, and went about through deceit to get Alexander's kingdom, and join it to his own. Whereupon he took his journey into Syria in peaceable manner, so as they of the cities opened up unto him, and met him. For King Alexander had commanded them so to do, because he was his father-in-law. Now as Ptolemy entered into the cities, he set in every one of them a garrison of soldiers to keep it. And when he came near to Azotus, they showed him the temple of Dagon that was burnt, and Azotus and the suburbs thereof that were destroyed, and the bodies that were cast abroad, and them that had burnt in the battle, for they had made heaps of them by the way where he should pass. So they also told the king whatsoever Jonathan had done, to the intent he might blame him, but the king held his peace. Then Jonathan met the king with great pomp at Joppa, where they saluted one another, and lodged. Afterward, Jonathan, when he had gone with the king to the river called Eleutherus, returned again to Jerusalem. King Ptolemy, therefore, having gotten the dominion of the cities by the sea, unto Seleucia, upon the sea coast, imagined wicked counsels against Alexander. Whereupon he sent ambassadors unto King Demetrius, saying, Come, let us make a league betwixt us, and I will give thee my daughter, whom Alexander hath, and thou shalt reign in thy father's kingdom. For I repent that I gave my daughter unto him, for he sought to slay me. Thus did he slander him, because he was desirous of his kingdom. Wherefore he took his daughter from him, and gave her to Demetrius, and forsook Alexander, so their hatred was openly known. Then Ptolemy entered into Antioch, where he set 2 crowns upon his head, the crown of Asia and of Egypt. In the mean season was King Alexander in Cilicia, because those that dwelt in those parts had revolted from him. But when Alexander heard of this, he came to war against him, whereupon King Ptolemy brought forth his host, and met him with a mighty power, and put him to flight. So Alexander fled into Arabia, there to be defended. But King Ptolemy was exalted, for Zabdiel the Arabian took off Alexander's head, and sent it unto Ptolemy. King Ptolemy also died the 3rd day after, and they that were in the strongholds were slain one of another. By this means Demetrius reigned in the 167th year. At the same time Jonathan gathered together them that were in Judea, to take the tower that was in Jerusalem, and he made many engines of war against it. Then certain ungodly persons, who hated their own people, went unto the king, and told him that Jonathan besieged the tower. Whereof, when he heard, he was angry, and immediately removing, he came to Ptolemais, and wrote unto Jonathan that he should not lay siege to the tower, but come and speak with him at Ptolemais in great haste. Nevertheless Jonathan, when he heard this, commanded to besiege it still, and he chose certain of the elders of Israel and the priests, and put himself in peril, and took silver and gold and raiment, and divers presents besides, and went to Ptolemais unto the king, where he found favor in his sight. And though certain ungodly men of the people had made complaints against him, yet the king entreated him as his predecessors had done before, and promoted him in the sight of all his friends, and confirmed him in the high priesthood, and in all the honors that he had before, and gave him preeminence among his chief friends. Then Jonathan desired the king that he would make Judea free from tribute, as also the 3 governments with the country of Samaria, and he promised him 300 talents. So the king consented, and wrote letters unto Jonathan of all these things after this manner. King Demetrius unto his brother Jonathan, and unto the nation of the Jews, sendeth greeting. We send you here a copy of the letter which we did write unto our cousin Lasthenes concerning you, that ye might see it. King Demetrius unto his father Lasthenes sendeth greeting. We are determined to do good to the people of the Jews, who are our friends, and keep covenants with us, because of their goodwill toward us. Wherefore we have ratified unto them the borders of Judea, and the 3 governments of Ephraim, and Lydda, and Ramathaim, that are added unto Judea from the country of Samaria, and all things appertaining unto them, for all such as do sacrifice in Jerusalem, instead of the payments which the king received of them yearly aforetime, out of the fruits of the earth and of the trees. And as for other things that belong unto us, of the tithes and customs pertaining unto us, as also the salt pits, and the crown taxes, which are due unto us, we discharge of them all for their relief. And nothing hereof shall be revoked from this time forth forevermore. Now, therefore, see that thou make a copy of these things, and let it be delivered unto Jonathan, and set upon the holy mount in a conspicuous place. After this, when King Demetrius saw that the land was quiet before him, and that no resistance was made against him, he sent away all his forces, every one to his own place, except certain bands of strangers, who he had gathered from the isles of the heathen. Wherefore all the forces of his fathers hated him. Moreover, there was one Tryphon, that had been Alexander's part afore, who, seeing that all the host murmured against Demetrius, went to Silmocui the Arabian, that brought up Antiochus, the young son of Alexander, and lay sore upon him to deliver him this young Antiochus, that he might reign in his father's stead. He told him therefore all that Demetrius had done, and how his men of war were at enmity with him, and there he remained a long season. In the meantime Jonathan sent unto King Demetrius that he would cast those in the tower out of Jerusalem, and those in the fortress, for they fought against Israel. So Demetrius sent unto Jonathan, saying, I will not only do this for thee and thy people, but I will greatly honor thee and thy nation, if opportunities serve. Now therefore thou shalt do well if thou send me men to help me, for all my forces are gone up from me. Upon this Jonathan sent him 3,000 strong men unto Antioch, and when they came to the king was very glad of their coming. Howbeit they that were of the city gathered themselves together into the midst of the city, to the number of 120,000 men, and would have slain the king. Wherefore the king fled into the court, but they of the city kept the passages of the city, and began to fight. Then the king called to the Jews for help, who came unto him all at once, and dispersing themselves to the city, slew that day in the city to the number of 100,000. Also they set fire on the city, and got many spoils that day, and delivered the king. So when they of the city saw the Jews had got the city as they would, their courage was abated. Wherefore they made supplication to the king, and cried, saying, Grant us peace, and let the Jews cease from assaulting us and the city. With that they cast away their weapons, and made peace. And the Jews were honored in the sight of the king, and in the sight of all that were in his realm, and they returned to Jerusalem, having great spoils. So King Demetrius sat on the throne of his kingdom, and the land was quiet before him. Nevertheless, he dissembled in all that he ever spake, and estranged himself from Jonathan. Neither rewarded he him according to the benefits which he had received of him, but troubled him very sore. 4th Maccabees, chapter 15. O reasoning of the sons, lord over the passions, and religion more desirable to a mother than progeny. The mother, when two things were set before her, religion and the safety of her 7 sons for a time, on the conditional promise of a tyrant, rather elected the religion which, according to God, preserves to eternal life. Oh, in what way can I describe ethically the affections of parents toward their children, the resemblance of soul and of form, engrafted into the small type of a child in a wonderful manner, especially through the greater sympathy of mothers with the feelings of those born of them. For by how much mothers are by nature weak in disposition and prolific in offspring, by so much the fonder they are of children. And of all mothers, the mother of the 7 was the fondest of children, who in 7 childbirths had deeply engendered love toward them, and through her many pains undergone in connection with each one, was compelled to feel sympathy with them. Yet through fear of God she neglected the temporary salvation of her children. Not but that, on account of the excellent disposition of her sons, and their obedience to the law, her maternal affection toward them was increased. For they were both just and temperate, and manly, and high-minded, and fond of their brethren, and so fond of their mother, that even unto death they obeyed her by observing the law. And yet, though there were so many circumstances connected with love of children to draw on a mother to sympathy, in the case of none of them were the various tortures able to revert her principle. But she inclined each one separately and altogether to death for religion. O holy nature and parental feeling, and reward of bringing up children, and unconquerable maternal affection! At the racking and roasting of each one of them, the observant mother was prevented by religion from changing. She beheld her children's flesh dissolving around the fire, and their extremities quivering on the ground, and the flesh of their heads dropped forwards down to their beards like masks. O thou mother, who was tried at this time with bitter pangs than those of parturition! O thou only woman, who hast brought forth perfect holiness! Thy firstborn, expiring, turned thee not, nor the second, looking miserable in his torments, nor the third, breathing out his soul. Nor when thou didst behold the eyes of each them looking sternly upon their tortures, and their nostrils foreboding death, didst thou weep. When thou didst see children's flesh heaped upon children's flesh that had been torn off, hands upon hands cut off, heads decapitated upon heads, dead falling upon the dead, and a choir of children turned through torture into a burying ground, thou lamentedst not. Not so do siren melodies or songs of swans attract the hearers to listening, or voices of children calling upon your mother in the midst of torments. With what and what manner of torments was the mother herself tortured, as her sons were undergoing the wheels and the fires? But religious reasoning, having strengthened her courage in the midst of suffering, enables her to forego, for a time, parental love. Although beholding the destruction of 7 children, the noble mother, after one embrace, stripped off her feelings through faith in God. For just as in a council room, beholding in her own soul vehement counselors, nature and parentage, and the love of her children, and the racking of her children, she, holding 2 votes, one for the death, the other for the preservation of her children, did not lean to that which would have saved her children for the safety of a brief space. But this daughter of Abraham remembered his holy fortitude. O mother of a nation, avenger of the law, and defender of religion, and prime bearer in the battle of the affections, O thou nobler in endurance than males, and more manly than men in patience. For as the ark of Noah, bearing the world in the world-filling flood, bore up against the waves, so thou, the guardian of the law, when surrounded on every side by the flood of passions, and straitened by violent storms, which were the torments of thy children, didst bear up nobly against the storms against religion. The Acts of the Apostles, chapter 19, verses 23 through 41. And the same time there arose no small stir about that way. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen, whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation, and said, Sirs, ye know that by this craft we have our wealth. Moreover, ye see and hear that not alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying that they be no gods, which are made with hands. So that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worshippeth. And when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath, and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And the whole city was filled with confusion, having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. And when Paul would have entered in unto the people, the disciples suffered him not. And certain of the chief of Asia, which were his friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not adventure himself into the theater. Some therefore cried one thing, and some another, for the assembly was confused, and the more part knew not wherefore they were come together. And they drew Alexander out of the multitude, the Jews putting him forward. And Alexander beckoned with the hand, and would have made his defense unto the people. But when they knew that he was a Jew, all with one voice about the space of 2 hours cried out, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, Ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how that the city of the Ephesians is a worshipper of the great goddess Diana, and of the image which fell down from Jupiter? Seeing then that these things cannot be spoken against, ye ought to be quiet, and to do nothing rashly. For ye have brought hither these men, which are neither robbers of churches, nor yet blasphemers of your goddess. Wherefore, if Demetrius and the craftsmen which are with him have a matter against any man, the law is open, and there are deputies. Let them implead one another. But if ye inquire anything concerning other matters, it shall be determined in a lawful assembly. For we are in danger to be called in question for this day's uproar, there being no cause whereby we may give account of this concourse. And when he had thus spoken, he dismissed the assembly.